Uh, James, if you're ready, the stage is yours. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an amazing event, and Bastian's talk was amazing. So, see what we can do to follow that up. I'm going to be talking about something completely different. I'm going to be on the off-site side of things. I'm going to be talking about link building. We've got a ton to cover, and I've got a ton of examples in here. So if you want to see in action, actual campaigns that we've put live over the last couple of years, I've got tons to show you in different verticals. So my name's James. I'm the head of innovation at Verve Search. Verve Search is an agency of 50 people based in London that works with household brands from around the world on ranking in about 7 different countries at the moment, though that kind of changes over time. And we build links from the biggest publishers in the world. That's kind of what we're known for. Now, what I want to talk about is how to get those links. I want to talk about how they're important. But to start off with that, I want to talk about how we're becoming and have become ad blind, what that means and why it's important. So you might remember from when you were a kid, you kind of sat down in front of the TV with your family and you all watched the same thing. And when you went into school the next day, everyone had watched the same thing and you were chatting about it. And so as an advertiser, the main thing you needed to worry about was if someone was going to the toilet whilst your ad was running. You had a captive audience. And that's less and less true with the advent of Netflix, with the advent of streaming. Everything means that audiences are just split into so many different places. And as a result of that, advertisers have had to put adverts everywhere. So, today, as you made your way here and as you make your way home, you will see, on average, 4,000 adverts. I challenge you when you go home to think about those adverts you've seen and think how many of them you'll recall. It'll be maybe 1, maybe 2. We don't see those adverts anymore. Samsung last year spent $11.2 billion on advertising. Think if you can remember one of their ads. This is one of the recent ones. This is what $11.2 billion gets you in terms of recollection of their adverts. This rings any bells to you? You're better than me. And we're an audience of marketers, right? We should know what's going on. But we don't remember these things. We're ad blind. And the reason we're ad blind is because 1 in 5 now spend 40 hours a week on the web. We're totally obsessed with it. Whether that's on our phones, this is the excuse for Parliament in the UK. Pretty sure she's on a dating site. Or just generally looking constantly on the internet.
The internet is a drug.
The digital cocaine of our time.
Electronic cocaine or digital heroin.
Some folks call it internet crack.
I can't survive. I'm an addict.
And the thing is, we're much better online than in real life at avoiding adverts, right? How many of us have ad blockers installed? We don't see those ads. Professor Barnes of the University of Massachusetts said that we're across the board able to filter out those adverts. And as a result, a lot of the money that used to go into these adverts, a lot of the money that used to go offline, is now going into native advertising. This is the rate card for some publishers in terms of how much they charge minimum for native advertising. It's scary huge how much they charge. And actually, they're not faring much better. A survey found that 95% can't recall the sponsor of native advertising. So what's the point? We're becoming ad blind, which means that organic as a channel is becoming more important because that's where our attention still is. That's where we're actively looking for a solution. But organic on its own isn't a solution. Otherwise, tech and on-site would pretty much be the limit of what we do. Increasingly, our preferences, whether communicated explicitly or implicitly, are key. What I mean by that is this. So we work with a client who's very well known in one country and almost unheard of in another country. And for basically the same terms, this is looking across 600,000 terms, their click-through rate was 1/3 in the country where they weren't known compared to the country where they were. Sorry, they get 3 times the click-through rate in the country where they're known. So being position 1 for them in the country where no one knows their brand It's the equivalent of being off of page 1 in the country where people do know their brand. It's not enough to just be position 1. People need to know who the hell you are. And you can't do that with adverts anymore because no one's seeing them. So how do you get that attention? How do you retain that attention? Well, the internet is becoming a smaller and smaller place. By that I mean our attention span is going to less and less sites. There are now 10 sites in the world that combined get 4.5 billion visits a month. And the average person will visit less than 100 websites a month. In Turkey, the number's 69. In the UK, it's 73. If you think about your own browsing habits, that kind of makes sense. You're on Google, you're on Gmail, you may be looking at a couple of newspapers. We view very, very few websites each month. As a result, going after every small blog or tiny website, no one's ever going to see you there. If you want to be seen, you have to be where those 69 sites are. You have to be where the interest is. And actually, the way we're searching is changing as a result. So now in the UK, more people search for Zalando than search for buy shoes as a generic term. More people search for details about Apple MacBook Pros than they search for details about buying a laptop. And more people search for Apple Watch than search for Rolex, and they're coming close to meeting that for watches as a generic term. If you're Rolex, you can't do anything about those Apple Watch searches. You're not in those results sets. So it's exclusive. If you've got that brand going for you, if you've got people searching for you specifically, you bypass everything else. You're number one automatically. But how do you become the default choice? Well, that's about brands as storytellers. What I mean by that is not Samsung's way of spending $11 billion and hoping that some of it will stick. But, well, think about your own experience online. Who knows what's happening in Hong Kong right now? Who's kind of heard about Brexit? It's kind of a thing we've got going on at the moment. You know about them because over half of us read news online at least once every day. Our attention is still on the news online. It's still on social media where we're sharing the news again online. By going after those top-tier publishers, the BBC of the world, the New York Times of the world, where people are still reading, people are still giving their attention, whether it's directly online or in their apps, then you can start building up that brand recognition. Then you can start getting people's actual attention. And by the way you get these, all of the smaller sites cover you in any case, because they're also reading the BBCs of the world, the New York Times of the world. This is going to sound a bit like PR, because great link building nowadays is like a PR campaign. It feels like it. It looks like a creative campaign, and it's shared like a social campaign. But more than that, great link building now builds rankings, traffic, and revenue. I think sometimes this is where we get lost. Because we think about great link building like PR so much nowadays, we stop thinking about these sometimes, and that's really damaging. So I'm going to be talking a lot about these three things. Because right now, we have the fundamental challenge that the way we measure link building is a bit broken. Regularly, I hear people say we want 250 links a month. And that's dumb. Because I can get you 250 links a month for a $5. But that's not going to do anything for you. That's probably going to hurt your rankings. So measuring just quantity of links is dumb. And then if we just say, okay, fine, we'll just get the big publishers because we know they're authoritative, we know they're trusted. I go into meetings with clients and they say, is that not just PR? And they have a point. If we just say, well, big publishers are authoritative, let's go after them, that is just PR. As SEOs, we're better than that. We've got to think about the proclivity of that publisher to no-follow. We've got to be thinking about how that publisher is sending the right kind of link equity, the right kind of relevance to your site. Because links aren't all worth the same. But we're bad at this as an industry because traditional link metrics, your domain authority, your trust flow, are really bad at measuring all these. They kind of just tell you effectively a score of 1 out of 100 as to how many sites are linking to that site. Not how relevant the content is, not how well placed on the site it is, not if it's in the same language as you're targeting. All these things that as humans instinctively we know is true and important, but the metrics don't do that. This bothered us so much as an agency that 5 years ago, we built our own algorithm to take these things into account. About a year ago, we made it free, available to the public, so you can go there and you can try it out. It takes into account over a dozen different metrics, including where the link is on the page, if the site is potentially penalized, because you don't want a link from a site that's under a Google penalty, and a bunch of other things. And we start with this, because we're understanding the right sites to target, the ones that are actually going to affect rankings, then that's a data science approach rather than a PR approach. But let's talk about what a campaign could, should, and can be. So let's split it into 3 sections: the concept, the format, and promotion of it. So we work in the UK with a company called GoCompare. They're one of the largest comparison sites in the world, and I'll come back to them a couple of times because there's some interesting campaigns we've got to share with them. But before we started working with them, we tried to understand who they were as a brand, because if we're going to get them brand recognition, which they have a lot of in the UK, to be fair, already, we need to be doing it in a way that speaks to their brand values and actually makes sense in terms of who they are. Now, on TV, they're Gio Campario, this very bombastic character. But internally speaking to their teams, we soon worked out that actually they're all about comparisons, as you might expect, but unusual comparisons. Comparisons where it's like, I didn't realize that. Let me give you an example. So I'm actually just speaking to a friend, and they're like, I'm thinking of investing in gold. It's a good, solid investment. GoCompare would be the guys that would turn around and go, don't invest in gold. If you want a good investment, invest in Matchbox cars. Because Matchbox cars have increased in value twice as fast as gold. And so we created a campaign that told that story, that looked at the Matchbox cars that had gone up in price the most over the last few years. It got 600 different websites covering it, including USA Today, the Daily Mail, The Sun. GoCompare is the type of brand that if you're sat there going, you know what, the Lord of the Rings film's actually ridiculously violent. Like, it's just a constant battle for 2 hours straight. GoCompare are the type that turn around and go, no. If you want violence, then Guardians of the Galaxy has the most on-screen deaths of any film in history. 80,000 on-screen deaths. You're like, what? Star Wars? Surely, planets blow up. No, on-screen deaths, it matters. The difference is important. So we created a campaign for their life insurance product, talking about death, explaining how that film was just quite so violent. And it went out to The Guardian, where it was shared 13,000 times, including by James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, who then argued on Twitter for 2 hours straight with fans that yes, our data was correct, and actually there are 80,000 deaths in the film, which of course propelled it across social media, 50,000 shares in 2 days, another 20,000 in the following weeks, and shared 620 times, all with links in them from places like NME, AOL, all the big entertainment sites across the web. What are you looking for when you're creating these? Well, internally, we use 2 key tests to work out whether an idea is good or not from a link building perspective. Depending on if you're a detail person or whether you're actually more of a person that cares about the bigger picture. I personally fall into the second category, but I use the first to persuade clients who are detail people. So, there's a book called Made to Stick. It explains what it calls success metrics. An idea has to be simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and a story. And because we're online, we add 2 more to it. It has to add value and has to be shareable. Let's talk about each one individually. Adds value. The web is a horribly negative place with horrible things constantly being said. I think we have a responsibility as an industry not to make it even worse. So we always put our ideas through this first test, which is, are we actually providing a benefit, making someone happy, making someone laugh, providing an interest point for people? Are we doing something that's making the web worse? Second, is it simple? Can you tell me the concept in 10 words or less? If you can't, it's overly complex, it's not going to stick with people. Is it unexpected? Will the reader be curious? Will they want to read on and understand why that thing's true? Is it concrete? Can I imagine it? If you tell me that 50,000 people turned up to somewhere, I don't know what 50,000 people are. If you tell me that you could fill a stadium with the amount of people that turned up to this thing, I can see it in my mind. It's concrete. People are really bad with maths. People do not understand what numbers mean. But if you can put it in a simplistic way that people just intuitively get, then it sticks. Credible. Tell me the methodology. Don't cheap out if you're going to do a survey on like a Google survey. Do a proper one with metrics that matter so that when you're taking it to journalists, when you're taking it to these big publishers, they can trust it. That also goes back to adding value, by the way. If your methodology is not credible, you are literally creating fake news. Emotional. Connect with me. Make me care about it. I only share things that are emotional. Take me on that journey and shareable. People share things that make them look good or make them feel good, okay? So I'm not going to share something if it will embarrass me if my mum sees that I've shared it. I'm not going to share something if it makes me look like a bit of a dick, okay? Think about, is this actually something you'd be proud to share because it makes you look intelligent or it makes you look like a good person? Because those are real reasons why people share things. And the simpler test, I call it the pub test. If you took that idea down the pub and spoke to your mates about it, would that conversation flow? Would that conversation continue? Or would they quickly move on? We get stuck in this idea of, oh, this is a really good marketing idea, but it's not a really good idea, okay? The pub test sorts this. Let me give you some examples of some generically bad ideas that we've come up with and frankly, happily never made, and some ideas that we've yet to make but that could be cool. So have you ever wondered what the carbon footprint of your favorite shows are? Now this sounds from a marketing perspective as it's interesting. You've got all the favorite shows in there, so you can go to entertainment sites and there's an interest there. Carbon footprints are an interesting topic, people are talking about them. But down the pub, hey mate, have you ever wondered what the carbon footprint of your favorite show is? No, James. No, I have not. That's not a real question you ask down the pub. What is the oldest tree in each country? Now this actually starts off with, this is how research can go wrong. This started off with an interesting factoid about a forest made from a single tree called Pando. It's amazing, have a Google about it. It's thousands of years old and it's just one tree that looks like an entire forest. And then we thought, how can we scale that? Okay, let's talk about the oldest tree in every country. And suddenly you end up with an idea that's not interesting anymore. How expensive would it be to insure different celebrity homes? This one is tricky, because this feels like a good idea, right? People are obsessed about celebrity homes. People are obsessed about celebrity wealth. This feels like something that lifestyle sites would eat up. But think about it. How expensive would it be to insure different celebrity homes? I don't know. Probably a lot. If they can afford that, that's Bill Gates' house. He can probably afford the insurance on it. It doesn't matter what the number is. I don't care what that number is. So that's a bad idea. Let's go to some ideas that could work. Did you know that most dogs are racist? This is a real thing. There's academic research behind it. There is, in fact, a test that an academic's created so you can find out if your dog is racist. So we could create that test so it's not just surprising, simple idea. Dogs are quite racist often. Here's a way to test if your dog is racist too. That could work. Did you know that the most dangerous sport in the world is cheerleading? Probably would have gone for rugby myself, but no. Professional data out there, really credible, you take it from all the professional organizations, shows that cheerleading is way more dangerous, way more likely to result in broken limbs. Unexpected. The Guinness Book of Records is the most stolen book from public libraries, and the Bible's second. This is UK data, it's probably different elsewhere, but it's very depressing. I don't know which bit confuses me more. The Guinness Book of Records is effectively a reference book, so you could look up what you need and then close it and you're done, right? You don't need to take it home with you. The Bible, those people need Jesus, but not in that way. This is potentially a good idea. Unexpected, it's going to create discussion, but it's not discussion in a way that's going to offend anyone. If you're looking for great ideas, here are some resources that we use often. Reddit is amazing for it. Data is Beautiful is where great ideas go to die in ugly graphs. Google Scholar, read through the academic research on this. You'll find tons of things that actually are horrendously boring, and then there'll be one stat that's amazing, but no one's ever bothered to read it because no one's read that journal article. Really credible once you find it because it's in the middle of an academic piece of research. Visualizing data has great examples of what other people are building. And if you want to see the pros in the industry do it, look at The Pudding, New York Times, and Washington Post. They've got some of the best data illustrations in the world. So that's concept. Let's talk about format. And it's at this point that most people say, maps get tons of links. And honestly, that drives me mental. Because if people covered things because they were in the form of a map, we would have bought the world's supply of maps and sent them out to every journalist by now. People don't cover stuff because they're a map. People don't cover something because it's in a format. A format is a vehicle to making something 5 things. Format is about, let's go back to the success metrics, it's about how you can make things simple. It's about how you can make things concrete, and it's about how you can make something emotional. You take something that's very complex in terms of a sentence and turn it into a single graphic to make it simple. You take something that's actually difficult to understand and visualize it in a way that it's very, very simple. You take a cause and then suddenly you snap an image of it, and that photo is way more emotional than prose could ever be. The fourth thing that formats matters for is where the links go. So this is a client called LensStore. This is their homepage, which has 136 links on that page. They're primarily caring about ranking for contact lenses, which they have a category page for. But it's just one of 136 links on that page. If we just made a press release and spoke to journalists, every link we'd get would be to the homepage. But if we can make stuff embeddable so that journalists want to put it within their work, or that gives them a reason to link directly to the contact lens page, that's going to drive way more rankings and value to the client to get those direct links to the contact lens page than get homepage links. Format allows you to do that over just a written document. And with format, you also need to finally think about how does it fit within an article. So all our campaigns are embeddable. All our campaigns can sit directly in. So this is an iframe. We're iframing in the campaign, and then it's got links at the bottom that are outside the iframe back to the clients. Journalists aren't going to do that if it looks really bizarre in their publication. They'll just take a photo. So you need to think with format, is this something the New York Times would produce themselves? Is this something that Target Publication X would get their team to produce if they had time? Note on this. People look at data visualization, they look at data scientists, and they look in awe at some of the stuff they're producing. And it is amazing, but I'll caution you, people are really, really dumb. Like, however dumb you think the average person is, it'll likely surprise you that they're much, much worse than that. So if you produce a complex graph, pretty much any of the examples on this page, the average person will not have a clue what your data says. As a result, you're making them think. Thinking is the enemy to emotion. As a result, you don't get an emotional response. So I'd actually recommend to stay away from most of these data visualizing techniques because you lose the opportunity to connect with people, you lose the opportunity to present the data in a way that's unusual and therefore sticks in people's mind. Great for a report, not so great for links. So let me give you an example. We work with Expedia, and for Expedia we wanted to talk about the wildlife we've lost, so how actually we need to care about the planet and be conscious of that in our travel abroad. And so we wanted to show how many species we've lost worldwide. And we could have done this with a graph that shows the amount of species in the world going down and down and down, or showing it with a chart for how many species are endangered, increasing over time. And those things would have worked, but they wouldn't have been emotional. What we did was we spent a lot of time thinking about what's the simplest way we could do this. And so what we did was we created a series of vintage travel posters showing the wildlife we've lost. So in New Zealand, there used to be the moa. You can't see them anymore. They're no longer alive. There's the golden toad in Costa Rica, and in Mauritius, of course, the dodo. These animals no longer exist. And we didn't put a ton of text with these talking about like pressuring people to care about this issue. We just put them out there and said, you know, these are what you used to be able to see in these places. It's really simple, and it really connected with people. It got 200 websites linking to it, including The Guardian, Travel and Leisure, BBC, Washington Post. But more than that, it got shared across social media. It got published in The Observer. Someone turned it into a mod for The Sims, so you can have it in the game. We didn't do this ourselves. Someone just did it because they loved them. And the thing that was most gratifying to see is that someone created a petition to thank the MD of Expedia for commissioning the campaign because they thought that it did so much to help push the cause and make people think about this. This was signed by over 1,000 people. When was the last time you saw a petition to thank someone for doing something? We connected with people on an emotional level because we were able to simply and beautifully tell that story. So that's format. And the next one is the one we get asked about most, promotion. How do we get it out to journalists? And it's actually the simplest of the lots. So the first question we get asked is, well, how do you get the contact details? How do you work out the right people to speak to? And that is super easy. We use tools. So Meltwater, Gorkana, depending on which country we're outreaching to, are databases of every single important journalist in that country. You pay for access, they tell you their contact details, they tell you how they like to be pitched, they give you an easy way to search for them by what they've published previously. So finding journalists to email is super easy. And then people ask us, what should they put in their outreach email? What does an email look like that's got BBC coverage or got New York Times coverage? And to that we answer, whatever you want it to look like. We spend a lot of time teaching people to follow the way that works for them rather than a prescribed way to outreach. One of the rules you hear a lot is to make your email short and snappy because journalists don't have a lot of time. Well, let me show you an email that we sent to one journalist. Okay, so this is a pretty long email, right? That's not the half of it. It goes on, and on, and on, and on. That's never going to get coverage, right? Journalists is never going to read through that. Well, you've got my attention with this brilliant release. Wish all PRs sent something like this. Now, apart from the fact that we're not PRs, it got the link on The Mirror, one of the biggest newspapers in the UK. And it got coverage, not because it was long, and you should be writing long emails and not short emails, but because that outreach person was in flow. That's the way that works for them. That's their way of sending emails. And I don't suggest you follow JC and how he does his emails, but whatever works for you, follow that in terms of how you write your emails. We recently had a journalist at, we run an outreach conference in the UK, and what she said was, email instead of calls. They don't have time for calls nowadays. Include high-res images so they can publish the story easily. Be specific and detailed, and do your research. We hear a lot about people reaching out to journalists who's like, I only cover London. Why are you telling me about something that's happening the other side of the country? Or I have never talked about this subject in the world. I have a friend who's a journalist who once wrote a piece on Father's Day about how cut up he was that he lost his father the year before. For several years afterwards, he was getting PRs contacting him going, hey, it's Father's Day. How about we send you off on this thing to do? Because they not bothered to read what he'd written. Like, do your research. And then the other thing is relevance, because relevance is becoming increasingly important. And we talk about relevance in three ways. Relevance for the journalist, relevance for Google, and relevance for the brand that you're actually creating content for. Let's talk about for the journalist first. So I'm not talking about individual journalists. Yeah, that's doing your research. You'll work out what they're interested in and what they're not interested in. But relevance changes over time. So we use these Google Trend reports often to see if a topic's peaking, if it's current. So in 2018, we produced a campaign around esports because we could see that it was trending up, it was becoming something that was talked about more and more. And we produced it for a betting company called Unibet, and it talked about things like who are the top earning women in the sports, how much prize money has been awarded, and how that's more than actually being awarded for NBA. And it got nearly 200 links, and we did this across the Nordics, which is particularly hard if anyone's ever worked in the Nordics, because gambling is extremely limited in the Nordics in terms of what you can and can't talk about, as well as big international publications like Business Insider. More recently, in the last couple of months, we launched CrepCheck for Farfetch, which is a fashion brand. Now, CrepCheck looked at trainers that are worth ridiculous amounts of money. So you can buy a set of trainers for £22,000. That's obscene. People do. People collect these things. Now, we thought this was a generally interesting topic, so we took it out there, but we'd done our research beforehand, and we were just waiting for something to happen.
Sneaker collectors have shown they're willing to spend big bucks to get their hands on the athletic shoes that they want.
Bucks, right?
And a pair of historic Nike sneakers just hit the auction block. These aren't just any old sneakers. These are a rare pair of 1972 running shoes known as the Moon Shoe. It was one of the first pairs made by Nike and the only pair left in mint condition. They were made for runners at
Suddenly, some Nike trainers were being sold for the most money ever of some trainers out there. But we expected this to happen because we did our research and we looked and we saw every 3 to 6 months, someone was talking about some trainers that were going up for auction for ridiculous prices. So we were ready for this. So the second that news broke that these were going up for auction and were going to be sold for literally millions, we were speaking to journalists going, you know what? You want a potted history of how much these things have been sold for? We've got that here for you. And we followed it every stage through the auction so that we were including ourselves, effectively newsjacking that, but we prepped for it way, way ahead of time. As a result, in a single month, we got 125 links for the campaign, including GQ, the style section of CNN, the lifestyle section of Cron, Mary Claire, Hypebeast, and Hype Bay. It got covered and shared by some big influencers within the community. And as a result, and again, so going back to rankings, we have to be talking about rankings and traffic. Rankings for terms like Alexander McQueen trainers searched 60,000 times a month in the UK, increased 6 positions. Proper increases from basically a month worth of outreach. There is a caveat to this. So this is searches for artificial intelligence, and you need to be looking for this. We start seeing a decrease here. We start seeing it level off. This is the point where journalists are sick to death of covering the topic. We had Richard Fisher from the BBC speaking at a conference recently, and he specifically said, please, for the love of everything, do not send me anything about AI anymore. If you're late on that wave, it's worse than not being on the wave at all. So look at what's been out there. Make sure that you're not the last person to be talking about something. Let's talk about relevance for Google. So this is all about the EAT update, the August update last year, which was massive in terms of relevancy. Let's go back to GoCompare. GoCompare sell a bunch of different insurance products, but car insurance is the big one for them. It's a big one for them because it's huge. Searches for car insurance as a term on its own are searched 500,000 times a month in the UK. For car insurance around the topic, it's 5 million related monthly searches. That makes it a £20 billion industry in the UK. That means being at position 1 is worth 450 Turkish lira a second. That's a crazy search term. That's just for car insurance, not just car insurance as a term. Position 1. And here's the cool thing. For years, GoCompare were at position 1. We were working with them to maintain it, to make sure that they kept it. They were happily motoring along, collecting, frankly, millions of the terms. And then the August update happened, and they woke up one day. Suddenly, it was a car crash. Instead of being position 1 for the term, they were position 9. And no one was really sure why. So we spent a lot of time researching this. Because we had built 4,000 links for them that year. And I know what you're thinking, 4,000 links, they're some shady links. But they weren't. They were sites like these. So we built some beautiful links from some amazing sites. Why did they go down? Well, Google had been over-indexing for authority. They cared more about authority of the links than the relevance. And we'd been going with that because it had worked. So, for example, we got a bunch of offline coverage as well that year, and TV and radio. We thought we were golden until August. But the campaigns we produced were, you'll recognize this one that year, things like Wheeler Dealer. And if you think, what has this got to do with car insurance? What has this really got to do with cars? It's toys, right? When you look at where it was placed, when the Daily Mail covered it, it was in the female section, not the motoring section, which is a weird place for it to be in any case, but its relevance to motoring was limited. But Google cared about authority so much that relevance really didn't matter until August last year. The year before, we'd created How Rappers Roll, which is about the cars that are most mentioned in rap songs, and the cars that rappers claim to have but don't really have. Chevy Impala, #1. But if you think where this is going to go, it's music sites, right? What the hell has that got to do with motoring, apart from, it's cars. Yeah, we're going to get the word car on the page somewhere. It's fine. This worked. But with the August update, it stopped working. And so we fundamentally changed the sort of campaigns that we did for GoCompare to be way more relevant. We produced Professional Drivers, which is about what professions are the best at driving. Are priests really dangerous on the road? Are clowns the best drivers there are? We produced Electric Avenues, which is about electric cars and the rise of electric cars and how governments are supporting that across the world. And we've produced offensive driving, which is about how no one really knows the rules of the road and no one really knows how they should be driving. Now these instantly, when you think about it, are going to go on motoring sections. They're way, way more relevant. And we worried what they were going to do in terms of links, whether the links are going to go down. They averaged 150 links per campaign. Again, those links were still good. There are places like the RAC, which is the biggest motoring organization in the UK. There are places like the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, USA Today. The difference is it's now in the motoring section of the Daily Mail. It's now in the motoring section of USA Today because we increased the relevance. And that really, really had an effect. So the update went live. We had a test campaign which did nothing, but they agreed to go with it because one campaign is not going to do anything on its own, and they already knew that. We had a time where we were building the campaigns and nothing went live. We started building links again here, and it went up and up and up until they're back to position 1 now. Relevancy was the problem. Relevancy is how the algos change. Relevancy is so important to think about now more than ever. Let's talk about relevancy for the brand. So we work with Babylon. They're a doctor on your phone app. So if you want to speak to a doctor, you install the app, you push a button, you can speak to a doctor within an hour. Fantastic, I use it myself. And they're in the medical sphere. So producing content in that sphere is hard, right? You've got lots of legislation and things you can and can't say. But they're all about tech. They have an AI that allows you to talk to it as if it was a doctor, if you want an immediate answer. They're really, really technical. They've got, I don't know, it's like 30 AI developers working in the company. It's huge. And so for them, we wanted to talk about that, and they care about social responsibility a lot, so they started talking about mental health a lot internally. So we're like, how can we merge these things? And we came across an algorithm created by Professor Mike Thelwall. He invented something called Tensi Strength. You give it a short piece of text, and it tells you how stressed the person writing it was. So we hear short piece of text, and we think, tweets. So we fed it millions of tweets and created national stress, where we're able to say, what are the most stressful parts of the UK? What are the most stressful times of day, times of the week? And where are the least stressed? If you need to take a break, where should you be considering going? Because people there are actually consistently less stressed as a result. We were helped by these being actually really unexpected results. We expected London to just dominate. And we also produced it for the US because they were about to launch in the US. So we had the US version of it too. It got 200-odd links, including Chicago Tribune, Time Out, MSN. Now, this is an industry where people are really struggling to get content out at all because of all the rules around it. This was totally relevant to what they do. And what we found in industries where there's not much link building happening, we found this in Finland as well, by the way, where very little link building action is happening, is that the effect of those links is massively oversized. So in the first 10 months of working with them, we got consistent coverage on national and international publications, and we think this is key. We think it's a bit like being a one-hit wonder in music. No one respects you until you've got that crucial third album out. We see the same thing with Google. They'll accept a blip as just that, but then, once you've got it coming out consistently, then you start seeing the rankings increase. Within 10 months, we saw an 8 times increase in their visibility because no one else was producing something in the sector because they couldn't get sign-off on the ideas. Relevance to the brand was huge. This was exactly covering the topic they were talking about from a creative perspective, talking about from a PR perspective. But also relevance from a Google perspective was spot on. It made the rankings grow hugely. So what am I saying? How do I wrap this up? As EAT, expertise, trust, and authority grow as factors, it's increasingly important to act as a brand, not just a company, because you need to be getting that increased rankings from an increased click-through rate, and because you need people to be searching for you as a brand and trust you, and have all those signals around the web that you are an expert in this sector. Relevancy is more important than ever. There's no point being an expert in music if you're a car insurance company. Measure links' potential, not the quality, and not the quantity. Because anyone can get 1,000 links, but they'll do nothing if they're not the right links in the right places at the right time. More than that, make your campaign a success. That success framework will allow you to get things signed off, I promise you, and allow you to dodge a lot of bullets with campaigns that don't really work. If you want to know more on this, if you want to go into details about the design of things or the exact emails, there's a lot of great things written in this industry, some of them by my very, very talented colleagues. Have a read through those. I'll share the deck later, or come and speak to me in person in the break. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. It was brilliant. Is there any question? Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you, James. It was a great presentation. I have a question more about the promotion stage of the campaign. Do you always go the exclusive route when reaching out to a journalist or a publication, or is it more like reaching out to more journalists and publications and just promoting it like using a press release?
We almost never give exclusives. When we do give exclusives, they'll be timed exclusives, so you can have it over the weekend and be first with it, and then we can go out 2 days later to everyone else. The reason we hardly ever give exclusives is, one, journalists are bad at getting back to people. So if you're offering them an exclusive and you're waiting to hear back to them before you can do anything else, that's a pain. And the other is that journalists less and less care, because unless you're breaking some massive political scandal, everyone's going to cover it immediately in any case. They're going to see what's written, they're just going to produce their own copy of it. You saw that with the golden dress, which was everywhere immediately, right? So journalists don't value exclusives as much as they used to, and they're a pain from our perspective in terms of working with them. So unless we've worked with a particular publication on it itself, so we did a piece with the Mirror, we obviously gave them access early, we really don't do exclusives anymore.
Thank you.
One more about the concept, how you get a more creative example, like when you get a new client, how do you do the research stage, or how to get a new campaign idea?
Everyone does it very differently, and so we've done a lot of research in terms of how people come up with ideas and how people learn, and there's about 4 or 5 different ways that people do that, in terms of like kinesthetically, in terms of visually, in terms of doing. There's a bunch of different ways that people learn and therefore come up with ideas. And so we let people do it their own way. I follow a methodology. I'll share a book on Twitter that's pretty much the methodology I personally use, which is all about kind of doing intense research, leaving it a while, coming back, and then drawing connections. A lot of people like working in teams on ideas and kind of chucking stuff backwards and forwards. I find that personally really difficult. I need no one else's thoughts in my mind when I'm doing it. But in terms of the data, some of our team use BuzzSumo, which allows them to see what's being talked about in the industry, what things have been successful and not successful. As I said, with that slide in terms of going to Reddit and going to Google Scholar, we look at things like that. We actually pitch in ideas before we sign clients so that they know exactly what we're building, and so that they buy in literally to the ideas themselves, which is a lot of work up front, but it's a lot more work afterwards if they don't really understand what they're buying and then go, why are you doing this? It's like, let me explain to you why that's really powerful. So a lot of different methods. Starts with understanding the brand, their tolerance to risk, what they care about, how prudish they are as a brand. But from there, realistically, it depends on the individual and the way they work, which isn't a great answer, I appreciate. But trying to force people to do it in particular ways that doesn't suit them actually really sucks. I stopped coming up with the ideas entirely myself at one point when we had brainstorms for everything, because I couldn't hear my own thoughts over everyone else.
Thank you. Thanks so much again, James.
Thank you.
Küçük bir kahve aramız var. Ondan sonra Yiğit bizlerle birlikte olacak.